How do you top your love for your cat? With a cascade of decadent savory gravy over a mouth-watering mousse pâté. Fancy Feast gems. 2 gourmet pâtés in one convenient pack. Simply peel and plate to reveal a pyramid shape that makes eating delightful and pamper her with an experience as extraordinary as she is. Turn the everyday into the extraordinary with Fancy Feast gems.
Abercrombie Kids knows how to make outfitting easy. Mix and match sets are their ultimate outfit hack for fall. Their sweatshirts and sweatpants are super cozy, and they always have the cutest colors and patterns. Shop fall's easiest outfit at Abercrombie Kids in the app, online, and in stores.
Hello and welcome to The Shift, the podcast that aims to tell the no-holds-barred truth about being a woman post-40. Created and hosted by me, writer and broadcaster Sam Baker. Now, we talk a lot about women who want out, who reach midlife and want to set light to everything and walk away. But we don't talk quite so much about the women who find someone else has put a bomb under their lives and left them standing in the rubble. And that's exactly what happened to Jen Hatmaker. After 45 years of living life according to the good girl rules, she woke up in the middle of the night to find her husband of 26 years, they'd been married since she was 19, voice texting his girlfriend in bed beside her. I know, right? I mean, anyway, in that minute, everything she thought she knew was over. And not once, but twice, because Jen, a best-selling author who had previously been a Christian women's influencer and grew up under the True Love Waits doctrine, had also experienced a crisis of faith that caused her to move away quite substantially from the conservative stances she'd grown up with. Now Jen has written a book, Awake, about what happens when you reach middle age and find that the very things that formed your identity are gone.
The greater story is fairly ubiquitous for women about this time of life. The loss or the change. So whether it is women going, my body is not behaving like I always expected it to, or my marriage is not functional, or my adult friendships are disappointing me in a way that I wasn't ready. My career, one way or another, is not delivering expectation. There is this battery of change and in some cases loss right around now that most women can go, oh, that's familiar.
Jen joined me to talk about the moment her life exploded, her midlife sexual renaissance, and how she learned to trust her body and take control of her finances in middle age. We also discussed society's obsession with marriage, her annual retreat to me camp, and why she's a total sucker for glow. Thank you for coming on The Shift, Jen. So I finished your book and oh my God. You're looking for someone who's been through so much. You're looking very relaxed, glowy.
Glowy. I aspire to be glowy. What a nice thing to say. Thank you.
Oh, well, you are definitely glowy. Yeah, glowy is it's my catnip. If you tell me something will make me glow, I'm there. I'm sold.
Totally. And in midlife, glowy is quite the aspirational adjective.
Yeah. I think after there was a backlash and all the beauty companies were shouted at for using anti-aging, I think they just switched to glowy and it had the same. We just all went straight there.
That's right. They just found out a way to rebrand it in a way that kept them out of hot water, but still kept us giving them all of our money.
Oh, absolutely. Totally. Yeah. Shall we leap straight in? Shall we start where it started?
Yeah.
At 2:30 a.m. on the 11th of July, 2020. Tell us.
I started the book right there when I was preparing to write this before I'd written a single word. And I knew that I was going to write Awake in a completely different format for sure, but also tone, transparency than anything I've ever written. I knew that. And so I had pulled in a couple of my most treasured creative partners and said, I have a very loose vision for how I want to tell this story. I don't know. I've never written like this before. And one of my partners said, all right, start in the ER. And I was like, yep. So the first two lines of the book start in the ER, as you just noted, July 11th, 2:30 a.m., 2020, which was the moment I was in bed, obviously, middle of the night, and heard my ex-husband now voice texting his girlfriend. And it was an unambiguous voice text. And I sat straight up in bed, and thus began, that was just the moment that my story split in half. There was a before and there was an after from that exact second.
With the benefit of hindsight, do you think he wanted to be caught?
I mean, I cannot speak for him. I know that he did not want to be married to me anymore. I know that we were just struggling and suffering, but I don't know what he wanted in that moment. I just know it's so interesting to be 5 years more of that time now. In an interesting way, I would, of course, never in a million years wished that type of ending on anyone, just on anyone. It was disastrous and unfair and cruel. But I can now say 5 years removed that I'm grateful for it, if you can imagine such a thing, that was symptomatic of a dozen things underneath it, which unfolded some immediately and some for me over time.
I mean, not knowing you, but, having done the inevitable, like reading, it seems like person that you seem to be now and the person who wrote this book, like you say, there was before and there was after that moment. That person seems like a completely different person.
In some ways, yes. In some ways, no. But that forced a reckoning that I had no choice in except to face. Some of that was pragmatic and practical and logistical. I had been married since I was 19 years old. And so here I am, 46 almost. And at the time, and that was the last day he ever spent the night in our home. So it wasn't kind of at that point a long drawn out process. It was an end. It was an ending. So I thought, I got to figure out everything. Money, mortgage. I mean, there's all this stuff to do. Some of it I had a decent amount of experience with, but some of it for me was brand new, having to be sort of in charge of all the logistics of my life by myself. I'd been married for 26 years. I had never had an adult independent moment as a 19-year-old bride. I was literally a teenager when I got married. And then some of it was an emotional and a psychological and a mental reckoning. And that at that point, that had only to do with me. Or I wanted to just lay that all at his feet and just say, this is what he has done to me, and this is his fault, and I am just, going to lay this at his feet and walk away clean. But that's not really how life actually works. So the longer I went, having submitted myself to the full process of therapy and an attempt at self-awareness, doing a bit of post-mortem on what on earth went wrong here after 26 years, married to a pastor, like having followed the rules and the template fairly closely. What happened, then there became sort of a different renaissance, which was in my own heart and soul. And I think that's maybe the difference that you see, that I took control and charge and agency over every aspect of my life, every single one, top to bottom, some because I was forced to, some because I chose to. And it has produced, I don't mean for this to sound hyperbolic, but it has produced the best version of myself, at least I've ever been so far.
I mean, I have had a lot of conversations, as you have, with women in midlife. So loosely kind of 40 to 60, some older. But what seems to come up again and again, whether, the grenade was put under their life by someone else or whether they put the grenade there themselves, that there does come a kind of awakening, a reckoning, a renaissance, whatever you want to call it at this time of life. Why do you think that is?
I find that exact thing to be true in my community. I told my publisher when we were at the starting line of Awake, of writing this book, that, and I don't know that this is certainly necessarily a good advice on how to sell yourself, but what I said was, my story is not special, and I think that is what makes it important. Yes, the small story nestled inside the book is about the loss of my 26-year marriage and then the subsequent rebuilding. The greater story is fairly ubiquitous for women about this time of life. And so the loss or the change, and sometimes those are interchangeable, and we can swap that in and out. So whether it is women going, my body is not behaving like I always expected it to, or like in my case, my marriage is not functional, or my adult friendships are disappointing me in a way that I wasn't ready. My career, one way or another, is not delivering expectations. My adult children, because that's the phase we're all moving into right now, is this launching of the children and into their own, and that is its own thing that not a whole lot of people prepared us for. So I think there is this battery of change, and in some cases loss, right around now, that most women can go, oh, that's familiar. I relate to that. Like, I am also having to reimagine or reinvent or rebuild. And so in that regard, I think this is a really important conversation that we are having right now with one another. For me, at least, I can say it has been incredibly comforting to bring my own personal tragedy and sorrow and loss to the community and find such soft places to land. And in some cases, of course, women saying, I know exactly where you're at. Like, I've been there. I walked that exact path. And let me tell you what you can expect, and that you are far more resilient than you think. And in other cases, women going, that's not my exact story, but here are the ways in which I relate. Oh my gosh, what a joy to have women in our lives during this sort of transitional season.
And they're crying out to have this conversation as well, aren't they? It's just like, they're like, thank God somebody else is saying this. I was wondering when I was reading the book, if that transition might have already started happening for you before the kind of the grenade, as we'll call it, of the middle of the night voice text, because you had already, after years, decades, growing up in the church, being a faith leader, you had already started to question that, hadn't you? Maybe 4 or 5 years earlier. So you had already started a professional, I guess, philosophical transition.
Definitely. I was a decade in to a spiritual and an ideological evolution. So I had already essentially burned down my first career for, I guess, integrity. I could no longer have this sort of duplicitous, which I didn't set out to be that way. But as I found my own beliefs evolving and realized, oh, these are going to set me deeply opposed to the community in which I have my career, I have my sense of belonging. That was my entire history. So knowing that I was going to place myself at odds. And I also, because I wasn't new to the evangelical world, I also knew that once I sailed my ship in a different direction, that the currency that would be taken from me would be belonging. I knew that. I knew that that was what I was going to sacrifice, and I did. And so I had already sort of gone through a major transformation on about a decade earlier, almost. Well, no, from now. At the time, it was about 5 years old, as you alluded to. And so there was a lot of turmoil. And then the loss of my marriage was almost kind of feels like the last clear marker and stake in the ground from that worldview, from that season, from everything that I had built around that set of beliefs and expectations and ultimately limitations. And that was sort of the last to go.
I was thinking that when I was reading the book, it did feel like, I don't know, I was going to say there are 2 pillars, but I'm not sure there were only 2. But it did feel like it was what was holding that up, what was left of, as you kind of put it, the good girl, Jen, which I know so many listeners will identify with, but that the good girl who'd done everything the family said, the church said, the doctrine said. It's really, really fascinating. So what happened next? Because I wondered, would the church have said, you've got to suck this up? You know, when you literally like packed his bag and sent him on his way the next day, didn't you? Would the church have, were you wrong to do that?
I don't know if there is a right and wrong in this moment. I don't think there is an objective, correct way to do any of this. There's no template for what happens when your spouse betrays you. And there's just a million factors that matter to every single story, which is why I have plenty of women in my community who have been through betrayal on either side of the equation, frankly, and found their way back to each other. They reconciled. That story absolutely exists. And then there's even a more messy middle story in which women try, or they go through a season of like, let's see if we can pull this back from the brink, and then do or don't. But so I don't know about where right and wrong factors in here, but certainly the pervasive message from evangelicalism aimed largely at women who have experienced betrayal, or even at the darker into the pool, abuse in some way, is to stay and to reconcile and to work it out in-house and honor your commitment, and all these, like, this morality that is attached to marriage, almost an obsession. The evangelical church is frankly obsessed with marriage at its own expense, honestly. And so in my personal spiritual environment at the time, we had started a church together in Austin in 2008. In very, very broad strokes, that church is more progressive in nature, and I would not call it conservative or limited. It's very affirming. And so I don't know that my individual church necessarily would have had marching orders for me, but the church at large certainly would have. And to be honest, let me be honest. I, at the beginning, thought, okay, let's see what's going to happen. He did not stay in the home that day, but we did move into a very short-lived season where he was working on whatever he was working on for all his own impulses and behaviors. And I was over here going, are we going to work on this? Are we going to move into the direction of repair? Are we going to try? And so even I left the window open for that possibility for a while.
I mean, like you said, you got married at 19, you'd been together 26 years, and you had gone straight, hadn't you, from your parents to your marriage house by way of a dorm room for a year or two. Was it frightening to be alone?
At first, it was terrifying. And we have 5 kids. So it's not as if this is just my story. I had 2 kids in high school still, so it's not even like they were launched. One of them was back. One of my adult kids was home at the time. Then another one came back. So for a big stretch of that early season, I had 4 kids in the house that were not grown. And it was COVID. It was 2020. So it was already the worst year.
Oh my God.
It was the worst year.
The worst of things.
Which it put everyone that I know, every family I know, into a pressure cooker that we were not prepared for, and we had no precedence for, and we were learning in process. So I had kids at home during COVID trying to work out COVID high school. And then I'm like, and I'm very candid about this in the book, I have this sort of financial reckoning where I go, I do not know how much money I make. I don't know what all of our bills are. I don't know where our accounts are. I'm not sure what has been coming and going. I mean, talk about blinders. When I titled this book Awake, that was the best term I could think of, because I was asleep. I was sleepwalking through big portions of my life. And so at the beginning, it was genuinely scary. I remember sitting in the office of my financial planner, somebody I'd never even thought of in my life, and him asking me all these questions that I sincerely could not answer. I did not know. Not only did I not know the answers, I didn't know where to find some of the answers. And I went out to his parking lot after that meeting and I just sobbed. in my car. Like, I can't do this. I can't do this. I'm too brokenhearted. My own trauma was just like taking me under. My body was falling apart. My kids were in such grief and distress. COVID, it was so overwhelming at the beginning, and so scary. And I had never been responsible for my life by myself. So here I am staring down my entire future without a partner, without a safety net, without a helper. And to some degree, some of that is still daunting, if I'm honest with you. If I could just be frank about that, some of that is still daunting. And I have this loop that I'm working on, I am better at, but I'm still scared about money. Money still scares me. Not having a partner who I know at any point can grab his own oar and row the boat. Like, it's me and it's me only. I am in charge of everything. I'm in charge of my future. And on one hand, that can be empowering, and it is. And on the other hand, it just can make me feel a little bit tight, someone who was married for 26 years. But all that to say, I am now at a place where all of those categories in which I felt so deficient, so ignorant, so foolish, now occupy some of my most proud moments in the last 5 years. Women are just absolutely capable of anything. You will not convince me otherwise. We can learn it. We can figure it out. We can get there. And then ultimately, when we do, we are responsible. Women are just responsible. We're good at money. We are good at planning. We are good at parenting. We are good at independence. I mean, there is a reason, if you look globally at any given culture or country, that the singular most effective way to raise the GDP and to lower crime and poverty is to educate and empower the women. And there is a reason for that. It's because women are trustworthy. Women reinvest their dollars into their family, into their communities. Women can be trusted. And so I found that to be true in my own life. I'm like, turns out I'm pretty good at this. Just a beautiful outcome that I did not expect out of such catastrophic loss.
This episode of The Shift is sponsored by Shopify. When I think back to starting The Shift, I can hardly believe I pulled it off. I mean, I knew nothing, and I had to figure it all out on my own. Scripts, scheduling, branding. When you're starting something new, it can seem like every time you tick something off your to-do list, 2 more things magically appear in their place. So finding a tool that simplifies the whole process can be a real game changer. For millions of businesses, that tool is Shopify. Shopify is the commerce platform behind millions of businesses around the world, from household names like Heinz to Allbirds and Skims. Get started with your own design studio. With hundreds of ready-to-use templates, Shopify will help you build an online store to match your brand style. Accelerate your content creation. Shopify is packed with helpful tools to write product descriptions, headlines, and enhance product photography. Get the word out like you actually have a marketing team to create email and social media campaigns wherever your customers are scrolling. And best yet, Shopify is your commerce expert with world-class expertise in everything from inventory to international shipping to processing returns, you name it. If you're ready to sell, you're ready for Shopify. Turn your big business idea into with Shopify on your side. Sign up for your £1 a month trial at shopify.co.uk/shift. Go to shopify.co.uk/shift. I mean, one of the things I love about Awake is at how honest you are about how tough it was to get through and to confront, your own part in the crumbling, I suppose, of your marriage. And I think that so many, maybe not to quite the same degree, the financial dependency, but the fact that you had this great, big, lucrative career. And I think many women will identify with that because there is a division of domestic load, isn't there? And you may be the person who does the money stuff, or you may not. And if you're not, then the chances are you don't know where any of it is, especially not now it's all online.
Totally. And I tell women in my community, I'm like, if you are the happiest married person that ever existed and your marriage is going to make it all the way to the finish line, like in full strength, you also need to know everything about your money. It's not just in preparation for what would happen if I got divorced, because death and disease and disaster it knows no bounds. At any moment, we have to decide to have agency over the elements of our life that matter. And that certainly includes money. And so I hope that readers will find very quickly, I did not hand them a very tidy villain and victim story. I might have. Thank goodness I didn't write this 3 years ago. I waited. I knew I need to live this story before I can write it fairly. What they will see is a lot of honesty. I talk about my own deficiencies, my own bad patterns, my own sort of unhealthy communication tactics that I really only confronted post divorce. It's not as simple as he did this and made this all happen. There's a lot of ownership, and should be, because I've got the whole second part of my life. Wherever I go, there I am. And so I did not and do not want to walk the same dysfunctions, the same deficiencies into the next season of life, not into another relationship, not into any sort of lingering codependency I've created with my kids, into my own career and future. That's up to me. That's my job. That's my work. Nobody can do that for me. And I cannot blame the lack of it on anybody else's decisions.
So has the divorce and the changes that you've gone through in yourself and in relation to the doctrine, has that changed the way you've been parenting your children?
Certainly. I'm learning to do better by them and for them. Some of that is my spiritual parenting, like what it looks like to care for their spiritual lives. And at this point, my kids are grown. I mean, I've got 5 kids. The youngest is 19. The oldest is 27 and about to have a baby in 2 weeks. So they are not under my umbrella in the way that they were when they were little. They're adults. And so, to the largest degree, they are in charge of their own story right now. But it certainly did and still does affect the way I lead and advise them, if I advise at all. I have learned to say when they call me with their things, do you just want me to listen, or do you want advice? And sometimes it's just to listen. They just want to vent. And I take that seriously. Now I'm like, okay, no, great. What do you want to do about that? Like, how does that make you feel? I put it back to them. And that includes their spiritual lives. As my own faith has evolved, and it's a very different version than certainly what I grew up with, I have released my grip on what and how I want my kids to believe, behave. And I realized that their own spiritual journey is theirs, and that they're going to go through it just the same way we all did, and we all are. And so I feel far less controlling about that as I used to. And I'm not scared of it either. I'm not scared of what path they choose and where they take and what feels true and resonant to them. I trust my kids to write their own stories.
Yeah, I was going to say, at the point you said about being less controlling, I was going to ask you if you were a person who had needed to go through life, and I say this as a person who is controlling for sure, if you needed to go through life with a really tight grip on the steering wheel.
Yes, the short answer is yes. Particularly when they were younger, I ran a pretty tight operation.
Well, you had 5 kids. I mean,
we got to have some order.
Got no choice. Yeah.
I have always had one part of me that doesn't white knuckle my kids' experiences. I'm not necessarily, I'm not a afraid mom. That's not really my deal. I've never had a big fear chamber around my kids and their choices. I really actually love the risks they take, and I like their adventurous spirits. And so I'm not so much controlling around one category of their lives. But yeah, for a long time in their younger years, I certainly felt like their choices, their behaviors were reflective of me. And so I made that piece of their lives more important than it was. I think put pressure on them at some point that I have since apologized for, and have released the governor on in parenting for sure. Parenting is so, anybody who comes to a 26-year-old brand new parent and says, I can tell you exactly how to do this right. I'm like, no, That doesn't exist. That does not exist. We will do the best we can. We will learn and change and grow. And in some ways, we grew up with our kids. And so I'm definitely a different mom now than I was 10 years ago.
I mean, you were brought up in purity culture, weren't you, in True Love Waits? How does that work with, how do I put this, being back out there?
Well, that's no longer my ethos, of course. So, and for anybody listening who doesn't know what that is, that just sort of meant I came up in my adolescent years, my teen years, young adulthood, in a religious space that prioritized like purity. So what that meant in short language is no sex before marriage, not just no sex before marriage. Like we weren't just supposed to keep a tight rein on our sexual actions, but also our thoughts. We were not supposed to think sexual thoughts, which is silly and impossible because we're just human people and our sexual sort of development is normal and it's natural and it's good. But there was such just a mantle of shame and fear laid over the entire enterprise that a ton of us moved into our marriages, into young adulthood, highly sexually dysfunctional. And so that has been a long reversal in my life, reprogramming those early narratives in which shame is such an impulsive response to anything sexual that it was almost hard to catch it by the tail. It was just so in lockstep. So, but I mean, I'm 51 years old. So I am no longer, that's not my sexual ethic. It is not my understanding of my body, my needs, my emotions, the way that I connect with another person. And it's no longer so deeply entwined with morality. Yeah, this is a really fascinating time to be going through a midlife renaissance, including a bit of a sexual renaissance.
So as well as, all the work you've done in the last 5 years, addressing your emotional self, has your relationship to your body and your sexuality changed?
My relationship to my body has changed in every way. And it's not just sexual. I mean, although there's that piece of my being an embodied person, but this is a real through line. In Awake, I worked on and created and developed a new relationship to my body over the course of the last 5 years, all of it. I was always taught that my body was not trustworthy, that I could not trust my own instincts, that I could not trust my own gut, my own desires. I always needed to outsource that to another authority to tell me what I wanted and needed. Becoming embodied again was really, if I had to pick one of the top paths through recovery and healing, it was embodiment. I could not get my mind to alchemize my experience, which is where I've always done all my best work, is up here in my brain. But I couldn't get it. My brain was just a poisonous loop of trauma and grief, and I was just spinning. So I had to sort of go into my body for really the first time and go, how could my body be a more gentle leader through this healing process? And so I experienced all kinds of bananas things that I had never done before, and which I write about, but it's like energy healers, if that's what, I'm not exactly sure what you want to call her, but an acupuncture and embodied retreats, meditation became a lifeline to me as a way to get out of my brain and into my body. Guided meditation, of course, I couldn't do it with my own thoughts. I didn't even know how to get there. And so my body ended up being my guide. And so now I have a completely different relationship with my body. I am like so grateful. And I have promised myself, I have promised my body, I will never abandon you again. Because to be clear, my body was sending me every red flag before I lost my marriage, going, something is dreadfully wrong. I knew it, but I didn't want to know it. And so I ignored that.
Your logical brain had been trained to ignore all the warning signs coming from the rest of your body.
Of course, been trained to ignore my body as untrustworthy messenger. And then also I just had this old programming that went, we protect our marriage at all costs, even if the cost is myself. I just wasn't brave enough or able enough to get over my position, which was that I really wanted the story of my marriage. I didn't necessarily want my actual marriage, but the story mattered so much to me. The vision that I had for my future, for my life, for our kids, for our grandkids was so entrenched and so wanted. I mean, I deeply wanted that. I could not, I did not allow myself to see what already was, what actually was. I just said, I'm going to ignore that. Thank you. And I'm just going to stay over here and pretend that this is going to get better.
This brings us back to what we were talking about right at the beginning about this midlife thing, because I think, you had your more extreme experience, and you obviously had the kind of the teachings of the church that were even more restrictive. But the way so many women are educated and brought up to be a good girl, to if you do all the right things will happen, and by this point you should be here. And you're absolutely right. And I had written down what you said about being, I think, in love with the story of your marriage, not the actual marriage, because I think that's what we all do. And we're educated to do that. Do the right things, press the right buttons, be a good girl. You will achieve this thing, just so long as you don't look too closely or question it.
There's an admission price that is fairly steep.
Yeah.
The good news, and that approach, be a good girl, get good girl things, is not unique to like a religious subculture. I think it is very ubiquitous in our generation, and certainly the generations before us. But the good news for me is I have, as mentioned, a bunch of young adult kids. I have 2 daughters, one's 25, one's 19. They are different. They are not buying into this. They are not willing to pay that price of admission. And they don't believe it because they've seen it not work for their moms and their aunt and their grandmothers. And they've already seen that it is a failing enterprise to imagine guaranteed outcomes if we put in the ingredients that, the patriarchy and capitalism at large wants us to, without questioning it, without challenging, the power paradigms. They're onto it. And they're very different. They're not interested in those rules that we all subscribe to, that we co-signed on. I learn a lot from the next generation of girls and young women and how they have decided to build their lives differently. It's pretty exciting.
I mean, you wrote that you had always been your own meanest critic. How did you kick that? How did you convince yourself that actually you had your own back?
If I want to answer that honestly, I will say I'm still working on that. I think that might be my lifelong work. Some of it is personality, some of it is environment. But when you have been told from such a young age that all your worth and value and belonging is predicated on your behavior and on how you serve the bottom line, boy, that forms neural pathways that are very hard to reverse. And also, I will just also admit that's my personality bent also is to please people, it matters to me what people think of me. I deeply want to be loved and cared for and respected. And so I am extraordinarily out of whack in this department for sure. But I am absolutely better than I was. This for me is something I have to chip away at, that I am loved. I have value, not because of what I do, not because of what I produce, because I'm so highly productive. And frankly, listen, that behavior is rewarded in our culture, very rewarded.
Yeah, so
I have received rewards for being that way my whole life. And so it's not very incentivized to reverse, but I can tell you that I have certainly worked on it. And I have a peace and a calm spirit in a way that I have never had before. People are asking me all the time right now, how are you feeling with Awake about to come out? Because it's just getting there's a lot of fuss around it. It's getting a lot of attention.
But you only have to open your mouth, don't you, for the other side,
for sure,
shall we call it? That your old fans, that suggest you literally Google your name and, the stuff that comes up, you're just like, oh, guys.
But even on the positive side of things, even when it's getting like critical acclaim attention and commercial success attention, even when it's that is still tying my value to what I've produced, And so when people are like, how do you feel right now? This is about to come out. It's going to be whatever it's going to be. But it's interesting to notice, and I've said this to my community, I have a very quiet, calm feeling in my heart about it, which is new. That is not my way. I am not quiet and I am not calm. Normally, when I have a book that's about to go out in the world, because this is like my 15th book or something, I'm wound tight as a top. I mean, I am just prepared to spin and razzle dazzle and just all of it, all of it. And I'm anxious about it. I'm worried for it. And it's interesting to notice, and I do check in with regularity and with honesty. How am I feeling? And I just do not feel that hamster wheel kicking in. I don't know what to attribute that to, except that I think I am learning to not tie so much of my value to what it is I do, to what it is I produce, to what it is I create, to what everybody else thinks of me. And so I think I'm just a little bit less afraid of that now. And thus it is creating for me steady feeling that I very much like. It is unfamiliar to me, but I very much like it and I am grateful for it.
What I bought? A new Blink Mini 2K Plus smart security camera. What I got? 2K clarity sharp enough to see every detail of home when I'm away. Plus audio like I'm in the room, not with my bestie traveling to another city. Plus easy plug-in setup to install faster than skipping through podcast ads. But you'd never skip ads, right? Plus, I got all of this for just $49.99. Blink Mini 2K Plus. Mini camera, max performance. Shop now at amazon.com/blink.
I mean, you must have a great network. Have you got a great network of female friends?
The absolute best. Awake, actually, somebody told me this. It reads like a love story to my best friends and family, and it does. And that is not inflated. It is not, It is real. By the way, Awake is not prescriptive. Like it's not written in chapters. I didn't go back and write it all in hindsight. I wrote it in vignettes in real time. I wrote it in first person in real time on the day that whatever that memory happened, but without adding my like commentary with the benefit of hindsight on that day. So that was so hard to write like that. It took me 1/3 of the book before I could write in present tense for all of the vignettes. I had to go back and change so many verbs so many times.
It's hard not to put what you now know in there.
It was, but I knew I did not want to write a prescriptive book. I knew I needed to trust my readers to just take this as it was and do what they needed to do with it, that they will apply whatever they need to their life. They will take what they need and leave the rest. And I'm not here to tell them this is what we think. This is what to do. These are the 10 steps to have a divorce. It's just not anything like that at all. I hope that really serves my readers, my trust in them, and their ability to alchemize this story in their own life in any way they need or want to, without me forcing my agenda on anybody at all.
Can you tell the listeners a bit about Me Camp? I absolutely love Me Camp, and I just know whether married, divorced, single, straight, queer, I think honestly everybody's going to go, I want a bit of that. That is such a great idea.
I loved writing that section. Awake is, again, it's not organized in chapters. I wrote it just in 3 big sections called the end, and then the middle, and then finally the beginning. And Me Camp is the first entry in the beginning section, that back third. God, what a joy it was to write, to get through all that relived trauma and loss and get to the part of the story where Hope re-entered the group chat. And that for me began in Me Camp, which was a turning point in my recovery process. In short, I ended up traveling by myself for a month in Maine the summer after I lost my marriage. So it had been a year, almost exactly. I was doing it accidentally. I was really only going to be near my youngest, who was at camp and fragile. And I felt like I needed to be near her in case she needed me, because we were just, both of us were so fragile, emotionally, physically. We had really suffered. So I went to Maine just to have proximity to her. Never been there. Didn't know anything about it. Didn't even know where I was going to stay. I'm throwing all this together at the last minute. It ended up being, I hate to say this tropey, for life-changing. It's like I literally woke up. and went, oh my God, I can do this. I am independent. I am autonomous. I love my own good company. I can still have adventure. There's still so much life left for me to experience. And so I was in Maine by myself for a whole month. And the best I can tell you is for how impactful and I called it me camp because my kid was at camp and I was on socials one day just telling everybody, this is what Bar Harbor is like, you guys, who knew? And I just on the spot said, I guess I'm at camp. I'm like, I guess this is me camp. I'm at camp too. And so I have since now had me camp every single summer since. I just had my 5th me camp in July. And I have this incredible template to work with now that I nestled the whole experience inside. But I was on the Oregon coast this year, a tiny little town on the Pacific Ocean. It has become so special to me. No matter what happens, no matter who comes into my life or doesn't, no matter what my story is, I am capable of a beautiful life all by myself. All by myself. I'm not waiting for something to happen. I'm not waiting for some relationship to toggle forward or backward, or I'm waiting on nothing. I'm in charge. And so I hope when Awake comes out that I get this influx of women telling me about their own me camps. That would be one of my most outrageously wonderful outcomes I could ever hope for.
Oh, totally. And if they're not, then they need to start.
Yes. And who can travel for a month? I know that's outrageous. I say it every year, but even going away for 3 days on your own, like engineering this independent experience that is yours and yours alone is, I don't know, the sum is greater than its parts. It's really special, because I've been doing this now for 5 summers and I've written about it at length every single summer on socials. Already, there's a huge community of women who do their own meet camps now. And so what a great outcome. God, if that's the only thing I ever inspire the rest of my life, I'll be so thrilled about it.
Yeah, it's much more radical than it should be, really.
Yeah, that's right.
Right, just before I ask you the questions that I always ask at the end, I just want to say one more thing, which is, well, actually, I want to say a million more things, but we've run out of time. I want to say thank you for talking about antidepressants.
Oh, yes. Gosh.
Because it's so rare for people to admit to taking them. And it's so rare for, it's just rare. It's just really rare. And as someone who I've been taking antidepressants, a small dose for a long time, and it's made the most enormous difference.
For a season, antidepressants and for me, anti-anxiety meds saved my life. I was in the ER. I hope to empower any woman who reads this for whom antidepressants are useful to never feel a second of shame again, ever. That is whatever we have to do to build sturdy, durable lives is what a mark of maturity. Like there's so much honor in that. So you'll never catch me saying a bad word about it. I wrote a love letter to Zoloft.
Right. What is your emotional age?
My emotional age. That's interesting. I'm 51 by the calendar year. I don't know. That's a really great question. I've never really considered my emotional age. I don't know what it is. I know that in some ways I was stunted early on, that I did not experience the fullness of young adulthood. I jumped right over it. I mean, I had 3 kids by the time I was 27. But also sorrow and loss has fast forwarded it a little bit. You go through it enough, and I've been through it, and that also kind of grows you up. And so I'm not sure how far off I am from 51, to be honest. I might be right in the pocket.
Give us a book recommendation.
I recently read All the Colors of the Dark by Chris Whitaker. It's a novel. It's stunning. Did you read it? It is.
Yeah.
I thought about it for weeks, just weeks and weeks and weeks. He's just a profoundly gifted novelist and characters you can never forget. Anyway, one of my favorite novels I've read in the last year for sure.
What advice would you give younger women?
Maybe what I wish that I would have been told, which was 2-pronged. If you have the capacity to stay highly self-aware, self-honest, that you're not like drifting into this victim narrative or blame game or outsourcing everything about you to somebody else, what they did, what they chose, how they raised you, whatever. If you are able to access a fairly high degree of self-awareness, trust yourself. You should trust your own opinion, trust your own instinct, trust your own gut, trust your own preferences, trust your boundaries, trust your desires. Like, you are a very, very trustworthy guide in your own life. The only one, frankly. That can go sideways if you decide to not take ownership of your own story. Because then at that point, if you are outsourcing authority in your life, then it'll be a hard place to source your own strength. But when you can stay right in the middle of your own lane with eyes wide awake, with a lot of self-honesty, then you are your best guide for the rest of your life. Never forget it.
Who's an older woman who's inspired you?
I drew some of my earliest inspiration from Anne Lamott in every way. As a writer and creative, I didn't know that we were allowed to write like that. I had no idea. But also as a spiritual guide, I didn't know we could think about God like that. I didn't know we could think about people like that. I didn't understand how we could be that generous and gracious, not just to other people, but to ourselves. And so she became a real North Star voice for me, and still is.
What's your superpower?
On a high level, my superpower is resiliency. I'm very resilient. Pretty awesome. To like come outside of my own body and look in on my story and go, girl, you just still keep going. I love it. On a small scale, everybody always tells me, go into your like special mind gift, because I can find where something is in my head. They'll be like, use your mental gift. And I'll be like, okay, hold on. Okay, it's in the third drawer, kind of in the back, behind something. I'm the finder of the things. I am the keeper of the lost things. I know where things are. Now, when I phone it in, they're like, have you seen it? And I'm like, no. And they're like, Mom, use your power. And I'm like, okay, it's upstairs.
And last one, how many fucks do you give?
God, it used to be all of them. I used to give all the fucks that existed. And now I feel like I may be down to 2, which is a big improvement from the way that I've always lived. But they are shrinking. I mean, I think by next year I'm down to 1, and maybe they're gone in 3 years.
Thank you for listening. If you enjoy The Shift and would like to show your appreciation, why not buy me a coffee? Go to www.buymeacoffee.com/The Shift with Sam Baker. You can hear a new episode of The Shift every Tuesday, wherever you get your podcasts. And if you like what you hear, please do rate, review, follow, tell your friends, because it really does help other people find us. And if you'd like to know more about my own experience of shifting, my book, The Shift, How I Lost and Found Myself After 40, and you can too, is out now in paperback.